You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday, 4th of August 2014. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, the best way to restore British values, Islam. Palestinian flag torn from Tower Hamlets Council Town Hall by vandals. BBC angers Muslim staff by hosting hog roast to celebrate Commonwealth Games under the windows of Arabic TV service. Greece, Golden Dawn members detained at Acropolis for distributing leaflets. Swedes to remove the concept of race from all legislation. Italian bishops, we can no longer remain silent in front of the persecution of Christians. A rant from IMNOKUFFAR. US troops told not to eat, drink in front of Muslims during Ramadan. Global gay, children and gender-free restaurants, NEA Teachers Union more extreme than ever. Thought for the day, the height of unfairness, isn't it? And finally, a case of the positive and negative apps. UK News. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, the best way to restore British values, Islam. Islam is rejuvenating British values, the former Archbishop of Canterbury has claimed, while lambasting sections of the press for presenting Muslims as un-British. Rowan Williams was given a speech at the annual Living Islam Festival in Lincolnshire, discussing what British values were and how Muslims could affect them. He said one of the greatest gifts to Britain had been bringing back open, honest and difficult public discussion, the Times reported. Asking if he thought Islam was restoring British values, he said, "Yes, I'm thinking of the way in which, for example, in Birmingham, we have seen a local parish and a mosque combining together to provide family services and youth activities, both acting out very strong sense that this is what communities ought to do." The now master of Magdalene College in Cambridge praised both Christianity and Islam for working towards community cohesion and promoting a sense of duty. But in comments reported by The Guardian, he also objected to the notion of British values, saying they should be more universal. The setting up, therefore, of British values against any kind of values, whether Muslim or Christian, just won't do, he said. British Muslim organisations welcomed Dr Williams' latest remarks, but secular groups objected to the suggestion that religious belonging is necessary for social responsibility. World at 8. Of course British Muslim groups welcomed this stupid man and his ridiculous notions, because the Church of England has become the puppet of the establishment, and now the establishment are promoting Islam in all its awfulness. Palestinian flag torn from Tower Hamlets Council Town Hall by vandals. A Palestinian flag flown over a town hall in East London has been ripped from the building in an act of vandalism. Mayor of Tower Hamlets, Council Lutfur Rahmin, made the decision to raise the flag as a humanitarian gesture of solidarity with the victims of the Gaza crisis. A council spokesman said the flag was ripped from its flagpole in a perceived act of vandalism. The council faced a backlash from Jewish leaders and campaigners following the decision to fly the flag. Campaign group Yad B'Yad UK, which supports people harassed in relation to anti-Semitism online, suggested the flag was an incitement and danger to the Jewish community. Mr Rahman tweeted an image of the flag with the message, "Palestinian flag flying at Town Hall in solidarity with Gaza and support of a ceasefire and peace." In a statement he said, "Some have suggested that raising the Palestinian flag is to take sides. However, my decision was in solidarity with civilian Palestinian victims, and I share the view of the UN, and these civilians have been unfairly and disproportionately targeted. Sometimes politicians need to take a stand in the face of injustice and needless suffering, and that's what I'm doing." World at 8. No, you are not, Rahman. You're flying the flag of the Muslim terrorists in a Christian country, and you think you know exactly what you can do with that flag. BBC angers Muslim staff by hosting hog roast to celebrate Commonwealth Games under the windows of Arabic TV service. The BBC has enraged Muslim staff after holding a hog roast to celebrate the Commonwealth Games under the windows of the Arabic TV service. An entire pig was spit roasted in the courtyard of New Broadcasting House, central London, with wafts of meat drifting up to the predominantly Muslim office. Staff in the department whose religion bans them from eating pork blasted the horror at spotting the carcass of their lunch break. World date. In Saudi, horror, but in England, get over it. We Brits eat pork, we love pork, and we will continue to do hog roasts wherever we please. If you don't like it, get another job, another house, and preferably go to another country. European news. Greece. Golden Dawn members detained at Acropolis for distributing leaflets. Around 50 members of Golden Dawn were reportedly detained at the Acropolis on Saturday for distributing leaflets to visitors, which claimed the party is suffering from political persecution. The leaflets were in English, French and German and were being distributed at the archaeological site. A few hours earlier, supporters of this party were suspected of throwing rocks and other items at an anarchist squat in Marousi, northern Athens. The assailants were on motorcycles and were reportedly on the way back from a memorial service for 2 Golden Dawn members murdered outside the party's offices in nearby Neo Iraklio 9 months ago. World date. We're going to see the same sort of prosecution levelled against Golden Dawn that the BNP have been the recipients of for many years now in the UK. Intimidation, demonstrations, kettling and just sheer bloody-minded ignorance. Swedes to remove the concept of race from all legislation. The Swedish government plans to remove the concept of race from all legislation, claiming that accepting that there are different races means one race is superior to another. However, the National Afro-Swedish Association has criticised the proposal, arguing that the concept of race is important in order to highlight discrimination. Swedish Integration Minister Erik Ullenhag told Sveriges Television SVT this week that we know there are really different human races. We also know that the fundamental grounds of racism are based on the belief that there are different races and that belonging to a race makes people behave in a certain way and that some races are superior to others. He said the concept of race had a negative connotation and was likely to stir up prejudice. Therefore, he will remove the word from Swedish legislation. Legislation should not include the word race if we argue that there are not actually races. I have wanted to remove the concept of race for a long time, the minister said. World date. This man is a nitwit and a fool. There are differences between many races. That is what makes them different. One should be proud of one's race, and this ruling is supposed to level all idiots down to an even lower level of ignorance. The difference should be celebrated, surely. The only time the difference is questioned is with the problem of massive immigration into Europe from the Third World, which surely even the Swedes don't want. Nothing to do with race really, but all to do with different cultures. Italian bishops, we can no longer remain silent in front of the persecution of Christians. Well, you've done quite a good job so far. Europe has become distracted and indifferent, blind and dumb to the persecution that today is creating hundreds and thousands of Christian victims. The baptised faithful in countries such as Iraq and Nigeria are living an authentic Calvary. They are being singled out for their faith and subjected to continuous attacks by terrorist groups. Before such an attack on the very foundations of civilization, human dignity and human rights, we cannot remain silent. The West cannot continue to look the other way, writes the presidency of the Italian Bishops' Conference in a statement announcing a day of prayer for persecuted Christians, which will take place on August the 15th. World date. Better than nothing, but an army would be better. Now I hand you over to IMNOKUFFAR. He has a range of opinions, from police versus extremist Islam and the jihadis who may be winning. Over to you, Eric.
Hi folks, IMNOKUFFAR here. This is a sort of missive about concerning a melange of opinions, and I can't take any credit for any of them. For the simple reason I didn't write them. Well, we'll start off with this one. The Metropolitan Police's Assistant Commissioner, Cressida Dick, says that it is up to the police to make Muslim communities wholly hostile to violent extremism. Why is that the police's responsibility? Isn't a core assumption of British policymakers that Muslim communities in the UK wholeheartedly reject violent extremism? except for a tiny minority of misunderstanders of Islam. Does Cressida Dick assume that violent extremism is caused by police actions, counter-terror actions, and thus can and should be ended by the police modifying their behaviour? This is just another manifestation of the willful ignorance of British authorities regarding the nature and magnitude of the jihad threat. Of course, the obvious reason why some extremists were not brought to the attention of authorities and why some Muslims are too accepting of radical views is because they are sympathetic to those views and regard them not as extremist Islam but as Quranic Islam. You get it? But that is something that the British authorities do not dare to consider. Now we come on to another subject which is sort of related to the prior one. I do not believe that jihadists are highly trained. Okay, so they may have learned to make bombs, but as highly trained soldiers, they are nowhere in the league with the Royal Marine Commandos or US Green Berets, for example. What they have gained a lot of experience in is attacking, murdering, and committing various acts of barbarism, mainly against defenceless people, including Muslims. Terrorism takes many different forms, not all of them violent. For example, disrupting people's everyday lives, transport infrastructure, the need for increased security, something any air traveller will have experienced to their inconvenience, and, of course, the extra vigilance required and the cost of combating them, etc., etc. In these respects, the terrorists may be winning. The threat comes as the Prime Minister describes the presence of around 500 British nationals in the extremist ISIS group as the greatest threat to national security in decades. This, from the man and his government who have decimated our armed forces, does not take the appropriate actions for fear of offending Muslims or upsetting community cohesion, and is the spokesperson for a government of cowardly appeasers. I think there can be no doubt we in the West are living with an enemy from within, and that includes our government. These other people are here by invitation. They are dedicated to destroying our way of life and its values. Yet, that does not appear to be recognised by our rulers. If they did, then the rules of engagement would be changed to take care of these people, their fellow conspirators and supporters, and by means of eliminating them. Now we have a short speech by David Cameron, who says we're building an immigration system that puts Britain first. He says we will close bogus colleges, cut benefits to jobless arrivals and stop advertising jobs abroad. He says this government has a long-term economic plan to secure a better future for Britain, and controlling immigration is a vital part of it. Liar. He goes on to castigate Labour by saying that 2.5 million more people came to this country than left. As Lord Mandelson has admitted, they were practically sending out search parties for people to come here. There was a failed point system which allowed so-called highly skilled workers to come here for up to 3 years to look for work. Often they ended up stacking shelves. There was an increasing generous, no questions asked welfare system which drew migrants to Britain for the wrong reasons. And unforgivably, whilst we had the highest rates of migration in our modern history, We also had well over 5 million people of working age on out-of-work benefits. I think this is great. Now that there are between 10 and 20 million immigrants in our country, many now with full British citizenship, and children born in the UK and having their own communities with their own courts and legal system, changing the British nature of our towns and cities forever. Now that our capital city, amongst other cities, has a minority ethnic British population, now you tell us we're building an immigration system that puts Britain first. Bugger off, Dave, and stop blaming the EU immigrants all the time. Non-EU immigrants are far more numerous and a much bigger problem. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
World news. US troops told not to eat or drink in front of Muslims during Ramadan. Military personnel at a government-run health science university in Maryland were reportedly instructed not to eat or drink in front of Muslims during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. The brigade commander at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Bethesda sent an email last month to military personnel instructing them to show respect towards their Muslim colleagues during Ramadan fasting, which ended July 28th, Fox News reported. This is a period of great personal restraint and commitment in addition to renewed focus on worship, Colonel Kevin Glatz reportedly wrote in an email. I'd like to encourage you to learn just a little more about this religion, but more importantly I'm asking you to be considerate and do not consume food or drink in front of our Muslim colleagues. It is simple yet respectful action. Several officers and doctors training at the USU reached out to Fox News' Todd Starnes to express their concerns with this directive. I respect the intention behind this email, but note there is no similar call honouring other faiths, said one Marine who spoke anonymously. There is no similar invitation for non-Jewish colleagues to refrain from eating leavened products during Passover, or non-Christian colleagues to refrain from eating meat during Lent. Our troops are being told to respect Muslim Ramadan and encouraged to say Ramadan Kareem, while at the same time they cannot have a cross on chapels, display a manger scene or say Merry Christmas for fear of offending, he said. World at 8. This guy is right. One rule for all or none at all. Global Gay Children and Gender-Free Restrooms, NEA Teachers Union more extreme than ever. Barbwire.com writes, the National Education Association in the USA wrapped up another radical convention early in July. The delegates in Denver focused modestly on education and a lot more on far left issues like pushing homosexuality on kids, defending the influx of illegal immigrants and supporting breastfeeding teachers while staunchly maintaining the organisation's advocacy to abort children. Welcome to America's confused teaching profession. The NEA delegates also passed new business item 52 to launch a global gay education effort, partnering with GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian and Straight Education Network, the Human Rights Campaign Pro-Homosexual Programme for elementary grades called Welcoming Schools, and GALE, the Global Alliance for LGBT Education, a Netherlands-based pressure group affiliated with UNESCO. GALE is also associated with ILGA, the International Lesbian and Gay Association, and GALE also receives funding from Arcus Foundation in Michigan, whose notorious executive director Kevin Jennings was the founder of GLSEN. Maybe it's just me, but when I hear Netherlands and gay in the same sentence, it immediately brings another word to mind: paedophilia. And sure enough, GALE's affiliate, ILGA, is a highly controversial group with ties in the past to several pro-paedophile groups, including NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. In other words, America's largest union will be joining other radicals with child corruption on track record to promote these deviant behaviours to school children throughout the globe. World at 8. You cannot please all of the world all of the time, and these retards have forgotten which country and which constitution they belong to. Thought for the day: the height of unfairness, isn't it? On reading the usual crap that suffices for news in the Sundays, when the Gazans have stirred up enough trouble with Israel to get the computers clicking away and the sodding Commonwealth Games is being held in a country that doesn't even want to be part of England anymore, one item stirred me even in this weather to become a gibbering old fool. That of the NHS, yes, our overstretched international health service, is actually thinking about giving free expensive IVF treatment to lesbians. Now, before all the whines about freedom of choosing an alternative lifestyle, let's get real here and jump off the diversity and politically correct hobby horse of opinion. Now, without harking back to the days when people of alternative lifestyles, as it is now called, existed and practised their dark arts behind doors and in private, the word is private and between consenting adults. Mark those words now, because these choices are out in the open. They are more than that. They have become almost obligatory to either train, work or become famous and rich. One must drink from the well of perversity to be one or all of these things. Now, it has always been so throughout history that the worse your choice is, the better your mark on humanity, even for what used to be called perverts. Now, in the public eye, and indeed being universally hailed in our education system as obligatory knowledge for infants, so like Christianity they can choose which sexual diversity they wish, these choices are no longer alternative lifestyles, but well publicised and accepted lifestyles. The government planned to force independent schools to promote sodomy and transsexualism as a reaction to the Trojan horse scandal, which is of course rampant Islamic radicalisation in our schools. In short, going to fight one evil with another. The establishment would rather promote anything deemed anti-Christian culture for our tribes than resort to what are thought of now as old-fashioned standards. Now, don't get me wrong, I frankly and on a personal level don't give a rat's arse as to whom buggers whom or who wants to change their sex or dress up or fancies their own sex or who doesn't, and I could go on for days but I won't, because I prefer the olden days when such things remained private and the business of those who wished to practice them. What angers me is the public money and the commitment given to what should be private sexual acts and preferences in this country. In days of old, if one wanted to shack up with a member of one's own sex, it was usually in the cases of lesbians that they did not fancy being married to a man and having a family life. It was as simple as that. These women and girls preferred their own sex, childless though it was, and that was usually the whole idea, to have a lifestyle alternate to that of being a married woman with children. The same applied to homosexuals of the male order. They didn't want to marry or live with the opposite sex. They were attracted to and needed their own sex with that same lifestyle, without families or children. That was the price they paid to society for choosing an alternative lifestyle. Tough but true. If you can't stand the heat, get out the kitchen, being the correct sentiment. Nowadays, whilst the NHS cannot afford drugs for cancer patients outside the postcode lottery, our old are increasingly marginalised into thinking they should go quickly and quietly off this mortal coil, and British taxpayers are paying a small fortune for foreign mothers to give birth in our hospitals. We are providing online databases for access to sperm donors willing to give their sperm to whomever can pay as little as £300, and the NHS is seeking to fund it. Now, apart from the appalling legacy of online perversity, this is really wrong on so many levels. Rather like the ghastly and cruel puppy farming, I think humanity, such as it is, has lost its way with the World Wide Web and its corruptive influence on our society. I do not believe that babies should be born to same-sex couples. It may be socially desirable now, but it isn't socially acceptable even in this day and age. Jane and John walking their online offspring to school will be nothing short of laughable, especially if most of our schools in the future are heavily Islamised. Now, these people have no truck with the self-styled choosing of what you do with your life at all, and to some degree I agree, let alone bringing in babies like pets to complete your alternative lifestyle change. The hint is in the words choosing an alternative lifestyle, not a lifestyle like Mrs Brown next door with the same sex benefits and 6 kids. No, you can't have it all. No one does, so why should homosexuals and lesbians get paid for it? We have enough fatherless kids roaming the streets as it is, and this is sheer lunacy at its worst. Why not clone the little buggers and hand them out on street corners just for fun? You may well shudder, but it could be the start of shape of things to come if allowed to get out of hand, in the name of diversity and alternative lifestyle living. The poor, the elderly, the sick and the mentally challenged in this country, and I mean our own tribes, are still suffering and still needy. Whatever happens in the world or a country doesn't affect the wealthy or the connected. That's a matter of fact. All the crap happens to the common people and is still allowed to happen to them, but not to people who choose to jump on the PC and diverse bandwagon. They are untouchable because it's either racist or plain nasty to criticise or denigrate their actions. But here goes. This was sent to me from someone who's been waiting for a brain scan for 2 months and still not got an appointment. It might not be quite up to date, but allows for a few more millions on these figures. Pension theft, the UK government handouts list. Someone please tell me what the hell is wrong with all of the people that are running this country. Labour, Conservatives and Liberals all say we're broke and can't help our own seniors, veterans, orphans, homeless, etc. However, in the past years we have provided direct cash aid too. Congo, 359 million. Egypt, 397 million. Ethiopia, 981 million. Haiti, 1,400 million. Hamas, 351 million. Iraq, 1,080 million. Jordan, 463 million. Kazakhstan, 304 million. Kenya, 816 million. Libya, 1,450 million. Mexico, 622 million. Mozambique, 404 million. Nigeria, 456 million. Pakistan, 2,000 million. Russia, 380 million. Senegal, 698 million. South Africa, 566 million. Sudan, 870 million. Tanzania, 554 million. Uganda, 451 million. Zambia, 331 million. And I can't read this total, but I think it's something like nearly 15 billion pounds, and the majority of them still hate us, while our retired seniors are still living on a fixed income. Do they get any breaks? No. While our government and religious organisations pour hundreds of billions of pounds and tons of food to a vast list of foreign countries. We have hundreds of adoptable children who are shoved aside to make room for the adoption of foreign orphans. In the UK, where we have homeless without shelter, children going to bed hungry, elderly going without needed medication or fuel to heat their homes, and mentally ill without treatment, and have the need for food banks, and yet we still allow illegal, deprived people and other freeloaders on our shores, while we are lining up to give them food, clothes, bedding, doctors, medical supplies and whatever else they need. Can you imagine what it'd be like if our governments gave us the same support they give to other countries? Sad, isn't it? 99% of people won't even rate this statement, but I'm one of the 1%. But of course our governments do give support to alternative lifestyle pufters and leses, immigrants by the cartload, Muslims by the lorry load, and anything and everything as long as it ain't English or a British tribe. Then you are quite regally and royally effed up. It seems tragic for this country that the very old joke about being a one-legged black lesbian is coming true. Is it a self-fulfilling prophecy, and if so, how can nationalism stop it? Or do we leave that to Islam when it's too late for us? And finally, a positive and a negative attitude. Late one night in a hospital, a guy regained consciousness. He found himself in agonising pain in the hospital's ICU, with tubes up his nose, wires monitoring every function, and a gorgeous nurse hovering over him. He realised he'd obviously been in a very serious accident. She gave him a deep look straight into the eyes, and he heard her slowly say, "You may not feel anything from the waist down." Somehow he managed to mumble in reply, "Can I feel your breasts then?" That, my friends, is a positive attitude. And a negative one. During a visit to my doctor I asked him, "How do you determine whether or not an older person should be put in a nursing home?" Well, he said, we fill up a bathtub, then we offer a teaspoon, a teacup and a bucket to the person to empty the bathtub. Oh, I understand, I said. A normal person would use the bucket because it's bigger than the spoon or the teacup. No, he said, a normal person would pull the plug out. Do you want a bed near the window? So are you going to pass this on, or do you want the bed next to mine? You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I wish you all a very good night. Religious belonging is necessary for social responsibility. World at 8. Of course British Muslim groups welcome this stupid man and his ridiculous notions, because the Church of England has become the puppet of the establishment, and now the establishment are promoting Islam in all its awfulness. Palestinian flag torn from Tower Hamlets Council Town Hall by vandals. A Palestinian flag flown over a town hall in East London has been ripped from the building in an act of vandalism. Mayor of Tower Hamlets Council Lutfur Rahmin made the decision to raise the flag as a humanitarian gesture of solidarity with the victims of the Gaza crisis. A council spokesman said the flag was ripped from its flagpole in a perceived act of vandalism. The council faced a backlash from Jewish leaders and campaigners following the decision to fly the flag. Campaign group
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday, 4th of August 2014. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, the best way to restore British values, Islam. Palestinian flag torn from Tower Hamlets Council Town Hall by vandals. BBC angers Muslim staff by hosting hog roast to celebrate Commonwealth Games under the windows of Arabic TV service. Greece, Golden Dawn members detained at Acropolis for distributing leaflets. Swedes to remove the concept of race from all legislation. He said one of the greatest gifts to Britain had been bringing back open, honest and difficult public discussion, the Times reported. Asking if he thought Islam was restoring British values, he said, yes, I'm thinking of the way in which, for example, in Birmingham, we have seen a local parish and a mosque combining together to provide family services and youth activities, both acting out very strong sense that this is what communities ought to do. The now Master of Magdalene College in Cambridge praised both Christianity and Islam for working towards community cohesion and promoting a sense of duty. But in comments reported by The Guardian, he also objected to the notion of British values, saying they should be more universal. The setting up, therefore, of British values against any kind of values, whether Muslim or Christian, just won't do, he said. British Muslim organisations welcomed Dr Williams' latest remarks, but secular groups objected to the suggestion that Yad B'Yad UK, which supports people harassed in relation to anti-Semitism online, suggested the flag was an incitement and danger to the Jewish community. Mr Rahman tweeted an image of the flag with the message, "Palestinian flag flying at Town Hall in solidarity with Gaza and support of a ceasefire and peace." In a statement he said, some have suggested that raising the Palestinian flag is to take sides. However, my decision was in solidarity with civilian Palestinian victims, and I share the view of the UN and these civilians have been unfairly and disproportionately targeted. Sometimes politicians need to take a stand in the face of injustice and needless suffering, and that's what I'm doing. World at 8. No, you are not, Rahman. You're flying the flag of the Muslim terrorists in a Christian country, and you think you know exactly what you can do with that flag. Italian bishops, we can no longer remain silent in front of the persecution of Christians. A rant from IMNOKUFFAR. US troops told not to eat, drink in front of Muslims during Ramadan. Global gay children and gender-free restrooms, NEA teachers union more extreme than ever. Thought for the day, the height of unfairness, isn't it? And finally, a case of the positive and negative apps. UK News. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, the best way to restore British values, Islam. Islam is rejuvenating British values, the former Archbishop of Canterbury has claimed, while lambasting sections of the press for presenting Muslims as un-British. Rowan Williams was given a speech at the annual Living Islam Festival in Lincolnshire, discussing what British values were and how Muslims could affect them.